This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we continue with Part 2 of our coverage of this week's congressional hearings held on the lead poisoning of the water supply of Flint, Michigan. One of the most tense exchanges on Thursday was between Governor Rick Snyder. The Michigan governor was testifying for the first time in Congress around the poisoning of the Flint water supply, and Congressman Matt Cartwright, a Democrat from Pennsylvania.
Your task force found that your officials at MDEQ did not implement corrosion control, which, quote, led directly to the contamination of the Flint water system. Do you admit that here today?
The lack of corrosion controls led to this issue.
And you admit that it was your officials at MDEQ that did not implement corrosion control, which led to that, right?
They did not instruct the city of Flint to do corrosion controls.
Is that a yes?
Again, they wouldn't be doing the corrosion controls. That's a city responsibility, but they failed in what I deem would have been common sense to say they should have.
The mayor asked you repeatedly to come to Flint during the crisis. Do you admit today you didn't show up for more than 7 months after he asked you?
Actually, I'm not familiar. I'd have to check my schedule.
Well, that's what he says. You didn't go to Flint until October 2015. Is that right?
I don't know if that's correct or not.
You don't know. Plausible deniability only works when it's plausible, and I'm not buying that you didn't know about any of this until October 2015. You were not in a medically induced coma for a year. And I've had about enough of your false contrition and your phony apologies. Susan Hedman from the EPA bears not 1/10 of the responsibility of the state of Michigan and your administration, and she resigned, and there you are, dripping with guilt, withdrawing your paycheck, hiring lawyers at the expense of the people, and doing your dead-level best to spread accountability to others and not being accountable. It's not appropriate. Pretty soon, we will have men who strike their wives saying, "I'm sorry, dear, but there were failures at all levels." People who put dollars over the fundamental safety of the people do not belong in government, and you need to resign too, Governor Snyder.
There you have it. That was Pennsylvania Democratic Congressman Matt Cartwright questioning, going after Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, who is testifying for the first time before Congress around the poisoning of Flint's water supply. Our guests are two of the leading activists in Flint, Michigan, residents of Flint. Nayyirah Shariff is coordinator with the Flint Democracy Defense League, and Melissa Mays is with us, activist and founder of What Are You Fighting For? That's WATER, What Are You Fighting For? A Flint, Michigan-based research and advocacy group founded around Flint's water crisis. She and her 3 children suffer from long-term exposure to heavy metals. Melissa, that interaction, you were right there. Nayyirah, you were right there. Did we learn anything new from the governor?
No, he did what we thought he was going to do. He danced around, gave the long answers, gave the positive PR spin that he was going to do. But a few things did come out. Like he mentioned, he was aware of water issues in 2014. He had never said that before. So we're getting deeper and deeper into it. So there was little bits and pieces that were good. So there has been this trickle of releases of email. Michigan's unusual. It's one of the only states in the country where you can't FOIA, get under Freedom of Information Act, information from the Michigan governor's office, right?
Yes. But these emails have been released. How have they gotten out, and what have you learned from the email leaks or releases?
The overall picture is that no one cared. They all knew about it. They were more worried about, covering their legal issues and their legal possible responsibilities and just brushing us off. I mean, Susan Hedman's email said that Flint isn't a community that she'd go out on a limb for. And that right there, that infuriated me because, obviously...
Susan Hedman being one of the heads, the Region 5
yes.
of the EPA, who has resigned.
Yes.
And she also testified.
With that email right there, she should have been fired as an example.
What did she say in the email?
That Flint is not a community that they go out on a limb for. Yes.
And who did she say that to?
She said that to the other members of the EPA. She was going back and forth about the emerging lead crisis.
And explain the report that she squelched that came from her own staff scientist, EPA staff scientist, Miguel del Toro?
He wrote what he found, that laws were being broken, they weren't adhering to the lead and copper rule, that there was a widespread lead problem. He'd already tested several homes that came back very high, and he sounded the alarm that this is an issue and it's probably the entire city. And they squelched it, saying it was incomplete, that, you know, the MDEQ referred to him as a rogue employee, and then we didn't hear from him for weeks after that. We couldn't communicate, and we had to fight. We still had to fight with it, and but
she apologized. Hedman, who's resigned now since from the EPA, she apologized to the city of Flint, the government there, for that report at the time?
Yes, saying there was nothing to worry about. Yes. So, again, her resigning was not heroic. I'm sorry, Gina McCarthy. It was not heroic that she did that. She should have been fired. She should have been disciplined, because look what happened as a result of her actions.
You met with Gina McCarthy, the head of the EPA, this week?
Yes. Yes, we did. We sat down with her to discuss the new water results that are coming from several homes, including my own. We're still having rashes. People are breaking open, their skin's bleeding, and nobody can tell us why. The CDC is testing and can't figure it out.
Who has these rashes?
A large part of the community, different races, backgrounds, ages, and we've had them since 2014. They burn, they peel off. It feels like your skin's just ripping off, and hair's still falling out, and no one can address it. So we got connected with Mark Ruffalo and Scott Smith from Water Defense, who has been testing water heaters and bathtubs the way you would normally use water, and we're finding all sorts of scary things. Chloroform is sky high, as well as—
How is chloroform in your water?
It's a byproduct of too much chlorine and whatever else is in our water, and that's the scary part, is we just don't know.
But the thing is, you already, finally, despite what everyone has tried to prevent from happening in the Michigan government, you have been disconnected from the Flint River, and you are reconnected to the Detroit water supply.
Yes. Unfortunately, the Flint River, the 18 months it was on, it absolutely corroded the entire infrastructure. So we're dealing with main breaks, bacteria, all the corrosion that lives and feeds off of, the bacteria that feeds off of that corrosion, and we're breathing it in the shower because most of us can't afford to bathe in bottled water. And like Nayyirah said, they give you a case. That's not enough.
Okay, now, Nayyirah Shariff, what is the situation with the bottled water supply right now? So you are not using the water that's coming through your taps, is that right?
For the most part, many people cannot afford to go around town to cobble together the bottled water for their basic needs. So at the state distribution sites, which are at the fire stations, residents are only limited to 1 case of water per day.
How many bottles is 1 case of water? We got one when we went to Flint a few weeks ago. It was just handed to us freely. Actually, it was Ice Mountain water, right, made by Nestle Waters, 2 hours away, bottled by them, taken essentially for free from Lake Michigan, bottled, and then the people of Flint have to pay for it if it's beyond the case that you get.
Yeah, so it's about 24 to 40 bottles, depending on the brand. So at the state distributed fire stations, it's 1 case of water per day. Many churches.
How many people does that serve? Do you have to show how many kids you have in your family?
No, that's 1 per household.
Wow. And, I mean, with a little bottled water, obviously you can't take a shower with that. If you bathe with that, you can't use it for anything else because there's not enough water.
Yeah, because people are need it for cooking. According to the EPA, pregnant women and children under 6 should only use bottled water. And so you have people making value judgments based on what to cook, what to eat, how to shower, how to bathe, based on how many bottles of water they have in their homes per day.
So what is happening now with Governor Snyder? I mean, you see the Democrats calling for him to resign in the House. But is there a recall effort right now in Michigan?
There's actually 2 recall efforts, one by Flint resident Quincy Murphy, and then another one by Detroit pastor David Bullock. And it's going to launch later on in the month, but they need nearly 1 million signatures in 60 days. To put it on the ballot.
And what would it actually do?
If people vote yes on it, then Governor Snyder will be recalled, and we will have a special election to elect the new governor.
And who exactly is behind it? The recall effort?
Well, we have Flint resident Quincy Murphy, and then we have another recall effort by Detroit pastor David Bullock, and they're right now in some sort of unity session. So we're going to figure out which one is going to move forward. Now,
your organization, the Flint Democracy Defense League, we went to a meeting of it when we were in Flint at a local restaurant.
Yes.
What does democracy have to do with water?
Well, you cannot. This water crisis is because we have a democracy crisis in Michigan, and it's the emergency manager law. And when you look at Flint, which we're still paying a premium price for poisoned water, and in Detroit, where they're still having shutoffs, this is like a tool for privatization and to take away and wrest away municipal water systems away from the hands of the people and turn it over to either regionalized efforts or to privatize transnational corporations like Veolia.
What's Veolia?
Veolia is a for-profit water company, and they do transportation, and they're in the water business.
Melissa Mays, you have new information about tests of the water?
Yes. We've been asking for a very long time. We went and did, of course, the private testing with the independent testing with Virginia Tech, proved that there was a lead and copper problem. But now that everybody's so focused on that, they're not really digging into what's causing the rashes. So we're found that there's a ton of different industrial solvents, sewage runoff, chloroform, as well as so many different damaging carcinogens in our water right now. So we're able to work with Water Defense, which is testing for everything in our water. And hopefully we have the answers as to what's causing the rashes. We delivered these results to Gina McCarthy, and I explained how the testing was done and that she needed to work with Water Defense to get this information out to the citizens.
Gina McCarthy, the head of the EPA.
Yes. They are in Flint right now with the CDC, and I said this needs to be done because people are in pain, they're bleeding, and the state's ignoring us still.
Talk about your own family. You have 3 kids.
Yes.
Boys?
Yes, all boys.
How old?
11, 12, and 17.
Mm-hmm. So take us through April 2014 to now and what happened to all of you.
In 2014, we started getting rashes on our arms, our backs, our faces, and you couldn't put lotion on it. We would get the expensive eczema cream, oatmeal scrubs, all these things to try to soothe the pain, and nothing worked. And also in about August or September, we started losing our hair by the handful, all 5 of us, including my husband. You would just wipe your hair out and you just have a handful of hair sitting there. And I said, okay, maybe I'm stressed out. Maybe it's stress. And maybe the kids aren't getting enough vitamins. So maybe that's why we're all tired. And it's all these excuses you make in your head because you never want to think that the water is actually poison. And of course, the city and state's telling us it's just harder water because it's river. That's the only thing. It's perfectly safe. You're fine. Even though we had E. coli boil notices, so we had fecal coliform in our water. It's fine. It's safe. Just boil it. So
now, wait a second. Just 1 second on this, because we were there and we saw these signs. On the one hand, they told you to boil your water. But we saw those signs on the side of the road that said, don't boil your water because it concentrates the lead when you evaporate off the water.
Exactly. And so then you're ingesting more metals, and also all the other contaminants like the cancer-causing byproducts are released into steam, so you're inhaling all of that. So by telling us to boil the water to get the bacteria out, put us more in danger. So again, the state had no idea what they were doing and should have never have been in control of the water because it was a complete disaster from day one. And so now here we are facing long-term lead and copper exposure. We have high aluminum in our water, which of course is terrible for your brain. I'm having seizures, tremors. I just had polyps removed from my stomach, which are caused by bacteria in the water last week, and as well as diverticulosis, osteoarthritis. My sons are now starting to fail. My oldest, he's so smart. He tested into a dual enrollment school where he's taking college courses at the same time so he can graduate.
How old is he?
He's 17. And so he can graduate with a diploma and an associate's degree. He's got a D average. He's in daily tutoring now. He was smart enough to test in, and now he's completely sidetracked. And my sons, their bones hurt. They can't play sports. They get tired too easy. They're anemic. They're white. My youngest, my baby, his white blood cell count is 4. So
what's it supposed to be?
10 to 14. for a healthy child, which is what he was before all this. And we're told that the long-term effects of heavy metals, exposure is not seen for up to 5 years. So here we are, we've got 3-4 more years to wonder what's going to happen to the kids, what's going to happen to us. My husband is sick constantly, and he's never been sick. He's that big Brutus guy that never gets sick. And here he's constantly sick, he's constantly dizzy, passing out. It's just things that you never would have expected. And we totally took our water for granted, and now we fight because just the way that they treat water as a commodity can kill people. People have died.
What are you talk about people dying?
The Legionnaires, they didn't tell us it was in the water. They told us it was no big deal. All these people, including my son, had pneumonia in the summertime. My youngest had pneumonia. In the summertime, they said, oh, it's just pneumonia. It'll be fine. Well, what the state knew and didn't tell, as well as our county health department, that Legionnaires, which is, it's a bacteria, Legionella is in the water, it's released into steam. So when you shower, you inhale it. 10 people died. They said it was no big deal. It didn't exist. There were 87 confirmed cases, and because the state never told the doctors to test for it, we don't know how many unconfirmed cases like my son. And my son could have died if he wasn't treated properly.
But there were 10 confirmed cases of people dying of Legionnaire's disease. I want to turn back to the congressional hearings held over the Flint water crisis in Washington this week. This is California Congressman Ted Lieu questioning the former Flint emergency manager, Darnell Early.
So even though you regularly, as you said, regularly met with water treatment plant officials, you had no idea that the water treatment plant operator has said, I am not ready to go on this. You had no idea.
No, there was no discussion on that in our regular meetings. What was going on?
Stop right there. You also testified that this was not a leadership issue. This is purely a water treatment issue. I suggest that this was a leadership issue if you had no idea, even though you had regular meetings, that this water treatment plant operator was making these statements that he was not ready to go. I'm curious, Mr. Walling, I commend him for saying I'm sorry and for apologizing. That took courage. Mr. Early, I don't see that anywhere in your testimony. Are you ready to say you're sorry?
What I've said, and will say again, is that, I was responsible. It happened on my watch.
Are you sorry?
I feel very badly about that, and yes, I'm sorry that the people of the city of Flint have had to go through, I said that earlier, this crisis. It tears me up inside. I'm very regretful and remorseful for what's happened.
That was Darnell Early. He was the Flint emergency manager who answered directly to Governor Snyder, who is the one who basically flipped the switch, who in April 2014 approved the cutting off of Flint from its traditional water supply for 50 years, the Detroit water supply, and turned to the corrosive Flint River. Nayyirah Shariff, how do you feel when you see him say he's very sorry that you all have suffered?
Well, we don't need his apologies. In late October, he had an op-ed in the Detroit Free Press basically slamming our local city council and saying that they approved the switch, and he had no culpability or responsibility in that. So that is totally offensive, and he lied.
Does he live in Flint?
No, he does not, and he's never lived in Flint.
But talk about how this happened. I mean, not only it was the Flint emergency manager who ultimately made this decision, is that right? At the point where an emergency manager is put into a city, basically the mayor and the elected city council work for him. They're his employees.
True. Under Public Act 4 and then PA 436, once an emergency manager comes into your city, the local mayor and the city council salaries are zeroed out, and through executive orders, the emergency manager determines their salaries and their job responsibilities. So basically, they receive job descriptions.
Darnell Early was the one who made the decision ultimately for the flipping of the switch. Melissa Mays, is there any truth to him saying, no, the city council approved it too?
Absolutely not. The city council voted to go to the Karagandhi Water Authority in 2016, so later this year. Had nothing to do with going to the Flint River in the interim. That was a decision by the emergency managers and held up by the emergency managers, Early and Ambrose. We went to them. We screamed our water's bad. We're getting sick. We need help. And we were told told that the decision was incomprehensible. It's just too expensive.
This is absolutely key, because we were just in Flint, and we were talking to the city councilman who introduced the resolution to return, and this was when? In March of 2015. Yes. They voted 7-1 to return to the Detroit water supply, and the next day, the new emergency manager at the time, Jerry Ambrose, as you said, called this decision incomprehensible and refused. When he ultimately was taken out, no more emergency manager in Flint, is it true that he said the one decision that must remain in place for a year after I leave is remaining on the Flint River?
Yes, actually all of his decisions, all of his orders, nobody could overturn them for 1 year, which is absolutely ridiculous because look how many people got sick. But we fought, and even after he left, we were had to deal with a city administrator who is basically a mini emergency manager who, again, had control over the entire city. And then, of course, we've got the Receivership Transition Advisory Board, and so we still have state control in Flint. After the state poisoned us and completely abandoned us, we still have to answer them.
So talk about the price of water now. Water bills. You had some of the highest water bills in the country. You were being forced to pay for poisoned water.
Yes. That
changed. They were lowered a bit, but you were still being forced to pay for your poisoned water. Now they've suspended the bills?
My bill never went down. They were supposed to lower our bills because it was found that they were illegally raised several times. My bill never went down. It actually went up $20. My balance right now for 3 months plus an adjustment that they put on is $1,812.81.
What?
Yes, that is my bill, and I am no way going to pay that because, one, my family's sick. It's destroyed. I mean, I've spent that much money in water heaters that we've gone through. And, yeah, so the bills are not suspended. The mailing of them is not suspended because the governor, in his great wisdom, knowing just how much water we actually use, decided to give us a credit towards future purchase of poison water. He said, well, we figured people used about 65% of the water to drink and cook. The other 35% was flushing the toilet and doing laundry. Even though our water was 100% contaminated since April of 2014, he's giving us a 65% credit, not on the service fees, not on the sewer usage, only on the water part, which is the lowest part of the bill. And so it's going to be put on people's bills only if you're current. So a lot of people who cannot afford the water or who just stood up and said, I'm not paying, you're poisoning my family, are not going to get the credit. We're not. And if you measure out the credit, it's only a couple of $100s towards these gigantic bills for future payments. And my thing is, we paid real money for our bills. Why are we not getting real money back? So there's all these loopholes, and so every time the governor says, I'm doing something heroic to save Flint, there's always a caveat, and it always ends up just hurting us.
So what has to happen now? Your mayor, Karen Weaver, has called for $55 million, wherever it comes from, to remove all the lead pipes of Flint. Is that happening now?
There's been one removal. Just one, because the governor hasn't sent the money yet. He said he was going to send $2 million. It's not here yet.
Doesn't the governor have a $1 billion rainy day fund for the state of Michigan?
Yes. Yes, he does.
He does. And
Nayyirah.
He does. And right now, Kevin Cotter, who's the Speaker of the House in the state of Michigan, says that there's not going to be any more supplemental funding or supplemental appropriations until the budgeting process is over. So we need money now, and all of this political games need to stop because we need a full-on humanitarian effort, and that $55 million is only for the lead service line replacement. It does not even begin to, which is going to be in billions and billions of dollars of psychological damage, the long-term medical needs and wraparound services that this community needs. We need lifetime Medicare for all to cover the medical needs of Flint residents long-term.
What difference has it made electing Mayor Karen Weaver? She is the first woman mayor of Flint and that also African-American mayor of Flint. She's a psychologist. When she declared a state of emergency in Flint, which no one quite understood even what that meant, but it was one of her first acts as mayor, what did that do?
Well, it really triggered this entire tsunami that we find ourselves in and catapulted the water crisis to a national stage because she actually ran on that platform that was going to be the first act that she did, and she did it within a month after taking office.
So what are you calling for now, Melissa? And have you ever considered moving out of Flint?
We support our mayor. What she's doing is fantastic. She's actually worked with the city of Lansing to find a cheaper, more efficient way to replace the lead service lines, because overall, the galvanized need to be replaced as well as the copper. All the metals are just too corroded. They need to be replaced, as well as interior plumbing and water heaters. So we are demanding that the president declare this not an emergency, but a disaster area, so it'll open up funding so we don't have to sit here and wait on the state, because they're obviously not helping us. As for moving, we've thought about it. I love my house. I love my house. We fought to get it. I love our lives here, aside from the water. But who's going to buy my poison water house? And there is no way I'm going to get anywhere near what I owe on it. We're 7 years into a mortgage. Nobody's going to swoop in and buy this house for what I owe. So we would lose so much. And then, again, we wouldn't pass inspection. We wouldn't pass inspection to get the mortgage. And on top of it, mortgage companies aren't lending because we're in a state of emergency, so they're not lending funds towards the homes in Flint, so we can't move out. And then on a moral standpoint, I can't be like, come buy my house. It's beautiful, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It poisoned us. Hopefully you'll be okay. So as much as we think about moving, we can't. Financially, legally, we can't. And then on the other hand, I don't want to leave the people we're fighting with. So we're stuck.
Well, I want to thank you both for being with us. Nayyirah Shariff, coordinator of the Flint Democracy Defense League, and Melissa Mays, activist and founder of What Are You Fighting For?, a Flint, Michigan-based research and advocacy group founded around Flint's water crisis. She and her 3 children and husband suffer from long-term exposure to their water supply. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.